The London Free Press podcast, indeed. And we are back for another week, other couple episodes coming your way this week. And I wanted to focus on what's going on with businesses in the community on the first episode of the week. And to do that, who better to be joining us than Norman De Bono, who, of course, writes about business concerns and many other things in the London Free Press. You can find a piece that he wrote on lfpress.com this week about the manufacturing sector. Norm, thank you so much for giving us some time today. Always glad to get a few minutes of your time to chat here on the London Free Press podcast.
Great. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Let's first talk about the piece that went up this week, and you were talking to area manufacturers, both at the micro level as far as one specific manufacturer, but the macro level as well as far as what's going on with manufacturers in this area as they navigate the global pandemic. So, what can you tell us about this piece?
Well, it's been really interesting to sort of track it, because what we're seeing is that there has been a real uptick in a lot of traditional manufacturing sectors. There's been a lot of growth in the agri-food sector as a direct result of the pandemic. Car sales are strong. Demand in the auto sector is very strong. London has a strong manufacturing foundation to it. We have about 34,000 manufacturing jobs in London, an area that's like London Middlesex. There are about more than 2,000 jobs posted in the London area, and of those, more than 200, about 10%, are in the manufacturing sector alone. It's not just automotive, though. Machining is seeing an uptake as industry is becoming very busy. Agri-food is taken off because people, when they're at home, they're buying a lot more food and a lot of packaged processed food. So there's been strong demand in that sector. The tech sector, although not traditional manufacturing, has sort of a share in that sector. The tech area is seeing a lot of growth too. So what we've seen is that there is a real demand for manufacturing jobs. The manufacturing sector is very busy at this time. And what's interesting also is that as busy as they are, in the London area at least, they've really managed to avoid, and this is what the focus of the story was about, they've managed to avoid a lot of COVID-19 cases. They've had ones and twos in plants, but they haven't had a major outbreak that's shut down a manufacturing plant. Remember early in the pandemic in the spring when it first broke, Toyota had a case, Cami had a case, and they shut down the plant for a while until they cleaned. And it was really indicative of me at that time how seriously they took it. And one manufacturer told me bluntly, he said, we have to be very careful about this, because if we get an outbreak in the plant, we shut down the plant and they lose money. They can't make any goods. So they're diligent in cleaning, mask wearing, distancing in the workplace, separation, if you went into their restaurants, in their cafes, in their break rooms, in their cafeterias, there would be distance markers throughout the spaces, and they have sanitation set up at the door coming in. So they're taking it very seriously, and it's really paid off. Right? Again, there have been cases, but there hasn't been a major outbreak, and they have managed to keep going. And to do that at a time when they're hiring, when they're adding jobs, like I said, more than 200 jobs posted now in the sector, it's quite remarkable, I think, really. And a real credit to them, to the work they're doing.
Absolutely a credit to them. They're keeping, obviously, people are going to say, well, they want to keep their businesses safe. And sure, that's but part of it. But by definition, that means keeping their employees safe, too, which is exactly what's going on here. Because if there's an outbreak, it's bad for the employees, it's bad for everybody. So clearly, there's been a pretty good spirit of cooperation here amongst both employees and the employers to make sure we avoid this stuff. And the results are very clear and very obvious that it's going pretty well.
Yeah, and in manufacturing workplaces in London and area, some are union, some are non-union. I think and largely represented by Unifor, and there's been a real buy-in there. And the food sector is represented by food sector unions, and there's been a real buy-in, a real support. Unions have also been diligent in sort of wanting that kind of safety in the workplace, but non-union plants as well. The workers have really sort of been working, from what I can tell, working hand in glove with the company in terms of trying to be safe on the job. Now, that's the manufacturing sector, and that's the good news. But unfortunately, there's the other side of that. It's like the best of times, the worst of times, and that is the service sector, and that is largely dominated by hospitality and food sector, restaurants. And we know that they're having a very difficult time now. They're getting hammered, and I think Restaurants Canada, the national agency representing restaurants across the country, has forecast that up to 60% of restaurants in any community, one community, could close as a result of the pandemic. We've seen it in the city already with some businesses really adversely impacted. Again, I just love the spirit of the entrepreneurs, right? What they're doing is it's not enough to sell food anymore. You have to do takeout and you have to offer curbside pickup. And now we're seeing markets emerge at restaurants like Grace and Blackfriars Bistro in London and others saying, okay, we're going to set up a little market on a Saturday afternoon. You come in and buy cookies or buy wine or buy beer or buy prepared foods. And it's just, and 100 Kellogg Lane is having the market this weekend where they're offering retailers and distributors and food companies as well as other retailers a chance to sell their wares directly to the public too. So there's a lot of innovation in the sector, which is kind of exciting, and I applaud them. I just hope it'll be enough because it's very tough out in the service sector right now.
And that just shows you the difference in how we all have to navigate this pandemic, because in the service and hospitality sector, you have a bunch of people coming in and out. People are, of course, eating food, things along those lines. But in the manufacturing sector, you can only have your employees come into the building and then you're going to be fine. You can make sure everything's cleaned and scrubbed down. Your employees are all wearing masks and you're probably going to be fine. So it just shows that it's very different from sector to sector, how we all have to get through this.
Absolutely, though. That's a very good point. And I think the pandemic has sort of really exposed real differences in the different business sectors and how they respond in a crisis and what the demands on them are. And then, the other, and still a third side of this whole issue is the office market, our men and women who work in offices and how that's been impacted. And a lot of those are, everyone's working from home now. A lot of people are working from home, and people are speculating whether that office market is even going to come back. Whether people who work at, like a London Life or downtown and TD Towers in the core area, how much of those are going to come back? We're already hearing from some businesses in that white collar sector that they realize that they can still work even though workers are at home. So they are looking at scaling back their office culture. But there will be a component of people returning to offices, we think, because people do want to preserve a workplace culture and identity, which being together in an office preserves, but more of it can be done. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more of a staggered situation in future post-pandemic, where offices are going into an area where people are working a few days a week from the office, a few days a week at home. Some workers may be fully in the office, maybe others may be fully at home. But a lot of people who are in offices are seeing a real mixed bag in terms of what their working conditions are like now. But I don't doubt that pandemic has changed a lot of things, and the office culture is certainly one of them.
Yeah, I would think so. And I think that the scenario that I keep hearing, you can tell me if you've heard from employers that are saying this, is that it might be a spot where, Anna works from the office on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Terry works from the office on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So Anna and Terry are both there on Fridays, but they're not there the other days of the week. They can get some stuff done. So you still have that office space, but maybe you don't need quite as much space. So that might be sort of the way this evolves from here.
Yes, I've heard that same thing, and I think right now there are a lot of things on the table in terms of the way businesses they're already planning post-pandemic. They want to save money on real estate if they can, right? I mean, rent's expensive, and they'll scale back rents and lease spaces where they can, in a bid to save money, especially post-pandemic, because they may look to cut costs and control costs where they can, if they've taken a hit on the bottom line, which they likely have as a result of COVID-19. But at the same time, there is a real presence of mind with a lot of business that they still want an office culture some of the time, come into work at other times. And I think, I think you may see more of that. But generally, I think across the board, office work has been fairly busy. The white collar sector has again really sort of worked through the pandemic, and they are staying, even though they're working at home, they're continuing on the job, which is a pretty good sign. We saw some positive growth numbers, in the last jobs report that came out on Friday from StatsCan that said that nationally there's been a pretty significant uptake in positions, and it's really to their credit. And I think also, if you look at some analysis done by major accounting firms nationally, has said that productivity is actually up, that people are working from home, and they might start earlier. They might go back to their office at their desk which is their dining room table, like I am talking to you right now, at 8 o'clock at night. They might work a little. They might just get up in the night and have a great idea, run down and sort of do some work. So productivity, the pandemic is people working at home has sparked this debate about are people working better, they're working harder, are they lazy, are they watching Friends in the middle of the afternoon? But across the board, I think the general consensus has been productivity is up and people are working more.
Yeah, I think Friends in the Office are coming off of Netflix soon, so productivity might go even up beyond where.
Oh my gosh! Well, that's tragic.
That's a big boon for everybody involved. Yeah, I think that's where a lot of folks are at on this, is wondering sort of what the future looks like. Well, at the same time, of course, you're trying to navigate the present, and that's not very easy. And you wonder where we're at when it comes to announcements from the province on what lockdowns are and what zone are we in right now. We get an announcement this week from the federal government that we're going to have 245 doses of the vaccination, which can serve about 120,000 people, a little bit more than that. So there's just a lot to consider, and so many different points of information that are really, really important. And none of us have been through this before. So it's just a really difficult time, I would think, to run a business, no matter which industry you're in.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say that, as much as it's just, I think a lot of small businesses have really come out sort of very supportive of the federal initiatives they're not perfect by any stretch. But there has been, I think, a genuine effort to try to support small business with loans, forgivable loans, wage subsidy programs, the rent relief program, which has now been reworked at the federal level. A lot of businesses have taken advantage of that. And a lot of businesses suggested that, in fact, it is good. And CERB, the CERB program has been extended to people who are actually working as well. So, well, not CERB, CERB's successor, CRB. So sorry. Yeah. So I think there's been a real effort on the part of some federal and provincial initiatives to support small business that have paid off, that have worked largely. Again, no, it's not perfect, but there's been some businesses that have stepped up to say that it has kept them afloat at this time, and they know now that they're going to need it really probably until the spring, until things, if we get that vaccine and if it's widely distributed, until we can sort of gather again as we did before.
Yeah, certainly. Last thing, Norm, before we wrap up quickly here, just getting back to the manufacturing angle that we started this off with, as obviously the manufacturing plants, there's testing and things along those lines, all these safety precautions that you and I were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Are they okay with those things? Are they things that perhaps may continue post-pandemic in some ways? What are we looking at as far as what the future of those might be, and both in the short and long term?
I think that I would be surprised to see pandemic type measures continue in the manufacturing sector well into 2021 and the new year, and even I don't know if it'll be post-vaccine or not, but there would be I think that a lot of the measures that you've seen taking place in terms of cleaning, distancing, I think they're going to be with us for some time. I think COVID-19 will change all workplaces, manufacturing included, in ways that we don't even know yet. But I mean, I think it will linger with us for some time. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because I think there's going to be a lot of precautions taken in the workplace, a lot of care. There is a real concern about there. And like I said, it's a critical industry for London and area, with 34,000 people working in manufacturing, and more than 226 jobs posted right now that are manufacturing plants that have opened in London area. So I mean, there's growth there, there's demand, and it's a foundational industry for us. So let's hope that it's safe and secure in the future.
Yeah, I hope the very same thing. Norm, thank you so much for joining us today on the London.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Podcast. Yeah, that's Norm De Bono. Yeah, thank you. He's Norm De Bono. He's a reporter with the London Free Press, joining us to talk about his story on lfpress.com and in the Free Press about manufacturing this week. Please subscribe to this podcast if you enjoy what you're hearing. I know a lot of you are, so you can do that via Spotify, via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Stitcher. Plus, find us on YouTube. A lot of people doing that. And, of course, on lfpress.com. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of the London Free Press podcast, and we will talk to you next time.